Have you ever felt that for an instant something bigger touched you? A different silence, a peace that had no explanation, as if for a second you had merged with infinity. Maybe it was during a meditation, in a moment of silent prayer, or even in the midst of chaos, when everything seemed lost, but strangely, you felt presence. Presence, that invisible feeling that something sacred is all around you, the touch of the divine, the soul being reminded of where it came from. But then, it all passed, and what was left? Empty. You touched the divine, but he felt afraid again. Insecurity, loneliness. You thought that after that spiritual experience everything would change, but what changed was, you see more clearly how much you are still hurt. And that's the part nobody tells you. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you still crawl through life?" The truth? Because flying hurts. Because awakening is not soft light. It is tearing away the old skin. It's looking inside and realizing that even having touched the sky, your pain still lives in your body. This video is not about easy answers. It's about you, about this silent cycle that keeps repeating itself. You feel something divine, something profound, but soon after returns to the same place within himself, that of doubt, of fear, of raw humanity. And then, the guilt appears. You think, how can I have felt something so sacred and still feel so lost? How can I have touched the divine and still cry at night like an invisible child? Maybe you're not broken. Maybe it's just in rebirth process. But being reborn hurts, and nobody teaches you how to deal with this middle ground between the touch of the divine and the pain of the human. You start to question yourself. Did I make up what I felt? Was it just emotion, or was it really spiritual? And that's where many give up. They close again, creating armor, saying, I don't want to feel anymore. It is better to live numb than to face this abyss within me. But you are not here by chance. Your soul has already recognized this path, and no matter how much your ego tries to protect you, distract you, something inside you can no longer unsee what he saw, can't unfeel anymore what you felt. Because once you touch the divine, your soul begins to rebel against everything that is shallow. The routine starts to feel empty. Superficial conversations tire you out. You feel that belongs somewhere else. But he's still stuck here, and it confuses you, because now you live between two worlds, the spiritual and the human, the light and the shadow, the flight and the ground. And this is where the real challenge lies. How do you integrate the divine you have touched with the pain that still lives within you? How can you not feel like a hypocrite for still suffering, even after having felt God? Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. But what if you are fleeing from the light, precisely because it illuminates parts you didn't want to see? Maybe the divine didn't touch you to take away your pain, but to show you that it is also sacred. And perhaps your biggest mistake was believing that being spiritual means no longer feeling pain, when in fact being spiritual is having the courage to feel everything, with awareness. Your soul doesn't want to get rid of the pain. She wants to cross, integrate, transform. And now, this is the point of the journey where you are, not completely lost, nor fully saved. You are between heaven and hell, between the memory of the divine and the reality of your humanity. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because you are not alone. And maybe, for the first time, someone will explain to you what is really happening to your soul, because nobody prepared you for this part. The part where you feel divine, but still bleed inside. The part where your soul wants to rise, but your memories still pull you down. The part where you start to see the world through different eyes, but still carries the weight of who you were for so long. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most sincere question your soul is asking right now. How do I reconcile the light I touched with the darkness that still lives within me? If at any point, what I have said so far touched something in you, if you've ever felt this silent conflict, this spiritual loneliness disguised as strength, write here in the comments, I felt the divine, but I am still human. Write this not just as a sentence, but as an act of courage. As someone who decides recognize yourself, even in the confusing parts, as one who chooses no longer run away from one's own soul. And if you're here until now, it's not by chance. This video was made for you, for the part of you that is tired of being silent, but he still hasn't found the words to explain what he feels. Here on this channel, every word, every silence, every reflection is designed to remind you who you are, not just the pain, not just the fear, but the soul, which is trying to emerge from under the rubble. Then leave your like, not for me, but for you, so that more souls in process can find this welcoming space. And subscribe if you feel like your journey is just beginning, or if, like me, you can no longer live on the surface, because what comes next will show you why the touch of the divine can be the beginning of the deepest healing of your humanity. Have you ever wondered why, after touching something so profound, so sacred, you feel even further from yourself? As if the closer you get to the light, the more vivid the shadows within you become. It's as if spiritual awakening, instead of completely liberating, opens doors you never knew existed, doors that lead not outward, but inward, to a silent space, where the soul whispers and the ego screams, where ancient pain still throbs, even after revelation. You touched the divine, but you went back inside and found the same emptiness, and that scares you, because deep down, you believed that, after that connection, everything would be different, that the pain would disappear, that fear would give way to peace. But what you found was a strange feeling of being more sensitive than ever, as if every word the other person says pierces you, as if your soul has been opened, but you still don't know how to live in this new state. Because yes, the problem is invisible. And that's exactly why. It's so difficult to understand. You wake up in the morning with that vague memory of something sacred you felt days ago, but it no longer embraces you in the same way. Silence doesn't console. Meditation doesn't bring relief. And the spirituality that once embraced you now seems to leave you alone. This makes you question your own experience. Was it real? Was it all just a moment of emotion? Was it nothing more than an illusion? This is where many give up. Here where the path becomes unclear, where there are no ready-made answers, where the promises of transformation seem to have failed. Because what no one told you is that true spiritual awakening doesn't remove your humanity. It intensifies it, and that's confusing, because most of us were looking for just the opposite, an escape, a relief, a miracle. But the miracle wasn't taking you out of the pain. It was making you look at her with different eyes. The miracle wasn't transforming you into something other than human. It was allowing you to be deeply human with divine consciousness. And that's the hardest part, because no one wants to embrace pain after having experienced peace. No one wants to go back inside themselves after having touched heaven. But that's what the divine does. It reveals. It doesn't erase your pain. It illuminates it. It doesn't remove you from the world. It shows you how to exist in the world more truthfully. That's why the problem you're experiencing now has no form, no name. It's subtle, existential. It's the conflict between the soul that has already awakened and the body that still carries trauma. It's the space between the light you once knew and the parts of you that are still in the darkness. You try to explain yourself. You try to put into words what you're experiencing, but you can't. Because how can you describe what only the soul feels? How can you make others understand that your crying no longer comes from the same pain as before, but from something quieter, deeper, almost sacred? This is the loneliness of awakening, feeling that you've returned different, but no one noticed. And more than that, you start to feel strange within himself, as if your old identity no longer serves you, but the new one hasn't yet formed. You no longer fit into the same conversations, the same desires, the same places. Superficiality irritates you. The rush of the world hurts you. You begin to realize you can no longer pretend. You can no longer fit in where you once fit perfectly. It's as if the soul says, now that you've seen me, you can't ignore me anymore. But this forces you to change. It forces you to face it. It forces you to abandon certainties that made you feel safe. And the problem is, most people don't want this depth. They want quick fixes, pretty mantras, ready-made phrases. But not you. You've already been touched. And that touch changed everything. And even without knowing how to move forward, you feel like you can't go back. Because somehow something inside you has already been broken. And what has been seen can no longer be unseen. So you live in this middle ground, between the old that no longer serves, and the new that hasn't arrived yet. And it hurts, it's tiring. It makes you feel confused, lost, all too human. You feel your soul screaming for silence, but the world demands performance. You want to disappear for a while to find yourself. but others demand presence. You want to retreat, but everyday life drags you away, and so your soul hides again, not out of weakness, but out of a lack of space to truly exist, out of a lack of understanding, out of fear of being judged as exaggerated, dramatic, too spiritual. But what you feel is not an exaggeration. It's expansion. It's not drama. It's your soul pulsating. You're not in crisis. You're in transition. And the emptiness you feel isn't an absence of meaning. It's an absence of superficiality. Because once you feel the divine, everything shallow begins to hurt. And this silent pain is precisely the one no one sees. The one you've learned to hide even from yourself. But it's there, and it needs to be heard. Not to dominate you, but to guide you. Because it's in this invisible territory where few have the courage to enter, that true awakening happens. Where the soul sheds all that is false. Where humanity bows, not out of weakness, but out of reverence for the truth that burns within. So if you're living in this moment, where it seems like nothing makes sense anymore, where spirituality has distanced you more than brought you closer, where the touch of the divine has left you more sensitive than healed, understand, this is part of the process. It's the chaos before clarity, the pain before reconfiguration. It's the soul preparing you to finally live deeply. If what you are feeling also lives within you, write in the comments, "The sacred touched me, but my soul still cries out for meaning," and know that you are not alone. Every word here was written as a mirror, so you can see yourself. And don't give up on yourself. The fall you feel may not be a real fall. Perhaps it's just your soul, silently trying to reconnect you with something you've forgotten, and which now, after having touched the divine, you can no longer ignore. What you call failure, confusion, or even an emotional relapse may be the exact opposite. A sacred return, an intentional descent. Your soul returning with what it received above, trying to find space within your limited, fragmented, wounded human body. And herein lies the root of it all. You're not regressing. You're just integrating. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in the entire spiritual process. Because when you experience the subtle, the elevated, the transcendent, whether in deep silence, in true prayer, or in a meditation that has permeated you, you touch a frequency that your soul recognizes. But when you return, your body still carries the old pains, the memories of abandonment, the traumas that have been stored in places you haven't yet wanted to visit. The light you've touched now begins to do something seemingly cruel. It illuminates what you've hidden for so long. That's why it hurts. And that's why it feels like everything got worse after it got better. Because that light you accessed, that divine sensation that passed through you, didn't come to distract you from the pain, but to guide you to it. Spirituality isn't an escape from your humanity. It's a call to dive deeper into it. And you feel it in your body, in your soul, in every silence that is no longer empty, but charged with meaning. You begin to wonder why certain wounds have begun to bleed again, why memories you thought buried are resurfacing with such force, why your sensitivity has heightened to the point where you feel almost skinless. The answer is there, right in front of you. You are no longer asleep. The spiritual root of your discomfort is precisely your lucidity. It's the awakening happening completely. Not just in the beautiful parts, but also in the parts that require courage. Because while you were simply seeking to feel the divine as an anesthetic for the pain, you still had control. But now you no longer want anesthesia. You want truth. And spiritual truth is raw. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But no one talks about what happens when that light begins to expand. When it touches not only the wound, but everything around it. When it begins to push everything you haven't wanted to look at, everything that's been repressed, to the center of your emotional field, the light reveals. It's unhurried, but it's also merciless. It invites you to heal, but it demands presence. And that presence, my dear listener, doesn't happen on the surface. It only happens when you decide to stop running away. Have you ever noticed that the more spiritually awakened you become, the more deeply you feel everything? It's as if the world becomes louder, sharper, as if each emotion takes on a stronger, truer tone. This isn't a sign of imbalance. This is the soul emerging from slumber. Because when you touch the divine, you begin to feel as the divine feels. And the divine feels everything. It doesn't filter pain. It penetrates. It embraces. So when you begin to remember who you are, you inevitably also begin to remember everything you're not. And this includes the masks, the emotional survival strategies, the characters you've donned to be accepted. The structure you built around your pain begins to crumble. That structure that held you together for years but now no longer serves. Because the soul no longer wants to survive. It wants to live. And truly living requires breaking these false foundations. What you feel now, this mixture of pain, longing, confusion, sensitivity, is the echo of that collapse. It's the soul saying, this is where you begin to integrate. Because there is no true spirituality without integration. And integration is allowing the light not only to visit you, but to remain within you, even if it means illuminating the darkest corners of your psyche. And these dark corners are the ones that hurt the most. They're where feelings of rejection, abandonment, and inadequacy reside. They're the fragments of pain you've carried since childhood and learned to bury. But the divine doesn't bury anything. The divine excavates, and excavating hurts. Not because it's wrong, but because it's deep. You might even try to escape this phase. Try repeating the same rituals to feel that initial relief. But nothing satisfies you in the same way anymore. The soul has already passed through a portal, and now it demands more of you. It demands authenticity, wholeness. It's no longer enough to appear spiritually well. You must be whole inside, even if that wholeness manifests for a time as chaos. The true spiritual process doesn't happen in elevated experiences. It happens upon your return. When you return carrying a light you don't yet know how to sustain. When you need to learn to live with this new perspective, this new sensitivity, without denying the world, without denying yourself. When you discover that true healing isn't about ceasing to feel pain, but learning to walk with it. Because pain is no longer an enemy. It becomes a teacher, a guide, a presence. It becomes what points the soul where it needs to go. And that is sacred. This is the spiritual root of the discomfort you feel. The soul returning to integrate what it touched. Returning to remind you that spirituality isn't about rising above pain, but learning to love even with the pain present. Learning to embrace every part of you that hasn't yet understood what happened in that sacred moment. Learning to breathe while everything inside you reorganizes itself. And this is all part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you. This confusion, this sensitivity, this apparent emptiness, it's all the space being created within you, so that the light you've touched can finally inhabit your entire body. If what you are experiencing seems to echo within you, if you feel that the light that touched you now is revealing everything you tried to forget, write here in the comments, "My soul is integrating the light it touched," and stay here with me, because the path to integration is just beginning. No one told you that spiritual awakening doesn't come as a sweet answer, nor as a definitive liberation. They didn't tell you that. Instead of feeling like you've arrived, you'll probably feel like you're being torn apart, because true awakening isn't the end of pain. It's the beginning of the deprogramming process. It's when the lies you've told yourself begin to crumble. It's when the masks that protected you begin to fall. It's not the sky opening up in eternal peace. It's the ground disappearing beneath your feet, and you realizing that now you need to learn to walk again, without the weights that once gave you false stability. That's why so many people give up soon after touching the divine, because they expected a miracle, not an earthquake. They expected an illumination that would pull them out of their pain, not a light that would push them into it. Spiritual awakening is much more about rupture than relief. It shatters, it ruptures, it undoes. What you were, what you believed, what you felt is true. All of this begins to be questioned by the emerging soul, and this soul no longer accepts being trapped in what is false, what is shallow, what is comfortable. You're not regressing, you're being initiated. You're being presented with a sacred choice. Either you continue running from yourself, or you finally dive in. And this dive, though it may seem confusing, is what begins to heal. Not with formulas, not with promises, but with presence. Presence with all that you are, including what still hurts, including what still resists. You feel it in your skin, in the way that suddenly, situations that previously went unnoticed now touch you deeply, in the way the right words seem to pierce straight to your heart, while what is superficial becomes almost unbearable. This is the beginning of your spiritual sensitivity. Not a fragile sensitivity, but one that sees deeply, that feels completely, that perceives the invisible even amidst the noise. And this at first can feel like a punishment, because it's uncomfortable to feel everything. It's exhausting to perceive so much. It's incredibly strange to look at yourself with the eyes of your soul and see that much of what you experienced was just emotional survival. You begin to realize that before, you weren't living. You reacted. You repeated. And awakening doesn't give you quick answers. It gives you awareness. And awareness at first hurts. That's why this rupture is so necessary. Because only when everything breaks can you see what you were trying so hard to sustain. Only when the old crumbles do you understand that it was no longer life. It was just repetition. And what repeats itself without a soul becomes tiring. The body endures, but the soul grows sick. That's why awakening comes as a rupture, to stop you from continuing to live an existence that no longer has space for your truth. But here's the point almost no one talks about. Awakening doesn't remove you from the world. It returns you to it, with your eyes open. And that's exactly why it seems to hurt more. Because now you see everything. You see your own neediness. You see the emotional patterns that were previously invisible. You see how you sought love like a beggar. You see how you tried to control everything to avoid feeling abandoned. You see how you became accustomed to denying yourself to be accepted. You see how you gave your heart to those who didn't know how to receive it. And seeing all this, it shatters you. But this is not the end. It is the beginning. The beginning of a kind of truth that no longer depends on anything external. The beginning of a return. Because true spirituality is not about ascending away from who you are. It is about returning within. Returning within with the eyes of the soul. Returning and saying, "Now I see. Now I accept. Now I no longer run away." The great illusion is to think that awakening means feeling good all the time, as if it were a continuous state of peace, gratitude, and lightness. This image sells well, but it doesn't sustain anyone in reality, because the reality of awakening is rawer. It's more vivid. It's contradictory. One day you feel peace, the next you feel anger. One day you feel gratitude, the next you feel immense emptiness. And that's all right. The spiritual path is not linear. It's spiral. It turns, plunges, returns, advances, descends, and breaks through again. This movement is what transforms you. It creates space within you so that the light of the divine isn't just a moment, but a possible internal state. And this state doesn't exclude pain. It embraces it. Because now pain is no longer a punishment. It's a reminder. It's a bridge. It's part of your initiation. You are not lost. You are being refined. You are not confused. You are being reorganized. You are not being punished. You are being called. A call to let die what is no longer you. And this call may come as a crisis, as loss, as silence, as exhaustion. But in truth, it is just the divine saying, "The time has come." The time has come to stop seeking light outside and allow it to emerge from within. It's time to stop seeking answers that will bring you relief and start asking questions that will transform you. It's time to let go of the illusion of a perfect awakening, to embrace the raw beauty of the real path. Because the soul doesn't want perfection. It wants wholeness. It wants presence. It wants truth. And the truth sometimes hurts. But it's this pain that frees you from the lie. It's what frees you from the illusion of control. It's what breaks the cycle of escape. Because after the divine touch, you can no longer pretend you're who you were before. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You've understood too much. And now, even if you still don't know how to move on, you already know you don't want to go back. You no longer fit in. And that's a good thing. Because not fitting in is the first step to finding your own place. A place where you don't have to lie, hide, or mold yourself. A place where your soul can finally breathe. If you feel like you're in that phase where everything is falling apart, but something inside you knows it's necessary, write here in the comments, "I am living the rupture of my awakening." Because when you recognize this process, it begins to recognize you too. And that's when true alchemy begins to happen. What no one told you is that feeling human after touching the divine isn't a mistake. It's not a sign that you've failed, lost yourself, or are spiritually weak. What no one told you is that this feeling of being more sensitive, more vulnerable, more emotional, this feeling of being exposed to your own soul, is an invitation, a silent, profound invitation, made not for you to run away, but for you to finally integrate. Because real spirituality isn't meant to take you away from your pain, but to teach you to sit with it. You're not falling. You're landing on the part of yourself that still needs to be looked at with compassion. You're consciously descending to touch your most hidden truth, the one that could never be expressed when you were simply surviving. Now, having felt the presence of the divine, your soul refuses to ignore what hurts any longer. And, as uncomfortable as it may seem, this is healing. The hidden key to this whole process is this: the discomfort you feel is not the end. It's the transition. It's the sacred interval between who you were and who you are becoming. You haven't gone back. You've simply returned to the point where you stopped feeling, so that you can now move forward with greater awareness. The soul has this mysterious way of healing. It takes you back to the very place of pain, but now with a different light. What hurts now isn't the same pain as before. Before, the pain was dark, confusing, suffocating. Now it's a pain that illuminates, that reveals, that confronts you with the part of yourself that hasn't yet been embraced, with the abandonment you never wanted to face, with the neediness that still guides your choices, with the anger you've learned to swallow, with the fear of not being enough, which hides behind every effort to please, and you no longer need to run from it, because you've already touched the divine. You've already accessed the remembrance of who you are inside, and now, this sacred part of you wants to inhabit your entire body, not just the beautiful moments. It also wants to enter the pain, the fatigue, the chaos. It wants to heal from within, not just inspire from without. What seems like weakness to you today is just sensitivity returning. What seems like chaos to you is just the soul organizing itself. And what seems like regression to you is just a landing on the forgotten part of yourself, on the part you've learned to reject because you don't know how to deal with it. Now, what spirituality invites you to do is not turn away from pain, but to transform the way you see it. Because when you change your perspective, everything changes. Pain stops being something to be overcome and becomes a portal, a sacred space where the ego dissolves and the soul begins to breathe. And that's integration. It's no longer about feeling good all the time. It's about feeling true, even when that requires going through the discomfort of not understanding everything, even when it confronts parts of yourself you don't know how to love. And it is precisely there, at this point where most give up, that the process deepens. Because those who give up aren't actually tired of the journey. They're tired of fighting what they feel. They're trying to experience an awakening without integration. They're trying to maintain peace as an escape, instead of allowing it to happen even in the midst of pain. The problem is that many still believe that true spirituality is lightness all the time. And they blame themselves. And they feel ashamed. And they feel false for still feeling human. But the divine doesn't reject your humanity. It chooses it. It honors it. It fulfills it. Have you ever noticed that the most transformative moments in your life weren't the most beautiful ones, but the most genuine ones? The ones where you broke down but deep down you knew you were being reborn. The ones where you cried silently, but felt there was something sacred in that cry. Spirituality isn't in control. It's in the breakdown that reveals a strength you didn't even know existed. This strength doesn't belong to those who win. It belongs to those who feel. It belongs to those who allow themselves to stay. To those who allow themselves to continue, even when everything inside them screams for escape. This is what differentiates those who access the divine and then transform it into consciousness, from those who merely collect spiritual experiences as distractions. The soul doesn't want experiences. It wants embodiment. It wants to live fully, not just in fragments of light. And so, the invitation now is for you to allow yourself to be exactly where you are, with everything you feel, with everything you don't yet understand, with everything that is trying to be born within you. This birth doesn't happen in a temple. It happens within your confusion, within your silence, within the days when you think you can't take it anymore. But you do, because something greater is sustaining this process, something you've already felt, something you know is real. Don't ignore what you feel now, because what you feel now, however uncomfortable it may seem, is exactly what needs to be felt. This is what will allow the light you've touched to find a permanent home within you, because it's no longer enough to simply access it. Now it's time to be it, to embody it, to manifest it, and that requires presence. Presence with the pain, presence with the emptiness, presence with the fear, presence with the soul, because the key is there. Healing begins when you stop running. If this part of your journey makes you feel exposed, vulnerable, and disconcerted, know that this is precisely where the divine anchors itself. It isn't waiting for you to get ready to arrive. It's waiting for you to open up. And opening up often means stripping away everything that protects you from pain. It means sitting with your humanity and looking at it as if looking at something sacred. So if you feel like you're on this journey, where the sacred has already touched you, but now you need to learn to integrate it with the part of you that still cries out for meaning, right here in the comments. I am landing in my truth, because it's in the courage to recognize yourself even in vulnerability that you begin to walk authentically. And that path continues just ahead. Perhaps you felt something profound during a meditation, a presence, a warmth, a silence so full of meaning that it felt like time stood still. And in that moment you thought, this is it. Now I understand. But the next day arrived, and suddenly you felt nothing. Everything returned to being confusing, mundane, painful, and what seemed like the beginning of your liberation turned into silent frustration. Or maybe it was at a healing retreat. You cried like never before, felt your body open, your soul breathe again. It felt like you were being emptied of a weight you'd been carrying for years. But when you returned home, something inside you exploded. People seemed to irritate you more. The world pressed down on you more, and an old anger, the one you thought you'd overcome, came back with a vengeance. And then you thought, what is wrong with me? How can I have felt so much peace and now be so raw? The truth no one says clearly is this. This is not failure. This is integration. It's the divine provoking the human, not to punish you and you, but to awaken you. The true spiritual experience doesn't end when you return home. It begins, because it's in the ordinary, in the daily grind, in confronting your triggers, that awakening becomes real. It's there that the soul proves to the body what it already knows. When you access a deep state of presence, of silence, of inner light, you touch a place within yourself that is pure, untouched, eternal. But your mind still carries old patterns. Your body still carries undigested emotional memories. So what happens after a heightened state is not a regression. It's the soul activating parts of you that were dormant, hidden, frozen. It's the soul saying, now that you've seen me, now that you've felt me, you need to encounter what still needs healing. And this encounter is anything but comfortable, because it brings out the shadow, that part of you that you built to protect yourself, but that now imprisons you, the anger you learned to hide, the fear you mask with control, the sadness you ignore by being too busy. When the divine touches you, it doesn't just want to move you. It wants to reveal you. It wants to show you who you are in your entirety, not just the spiritualized version you created to survive. And it dismantles you, because it's easy to feel connected when everything is silent, with candles lit, incense burning, eyes closed. What's really hard is keeping your heart open when someone ignores you, when life challenges you, when your emotional patterns return like ghosts. But that's exactly where the miracle lies. True spirituality begins when you allow the sacred to breathe within your pain. It's at this point that you realize that crying after meditation wasn't a mistake. It was an overflow. That the anger after the retreat wasn't a setback. It was a release of everything that was being held in check. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that the soul is pushing the ego out of center. And the ego doesn't go away without resistance. It fights. It tries to convince you that everything is falling apart, but it's not. It's just reorganizing itself. Imagine someone who has spent their entire life repressing the pain of abandonment, always trying to please, avoid conflict, not bother. This person lives to be accepted, and at some point, they experience a profound connection. They feel their soul for the first time. They touch a silent peace, but upon returning, they begin to feel invisible again. They begin to notice how they repeat the pattern of not asserting themselves, of nullifying themselves, and then comes the discomfort, the irritation, the frustration. This isn't weakness. It's the light they've now accessed, illuminating the emotional hole where this pattern formed, and they face a choice: go back to hiding, or break through. Crossing doesn't mean solving everything at once. It means being present, being lucid, being aware that pain doesn't need to be avoided. It needs to be felt, looked at, listened to, because when the soul begins to integrate, it no longer needs to run from what is human. On the contrary, it begins to honor humanity as an essential part of its spiritual expression. There is no complete spiritual experience that excludes pain, because pain is the space where the divine anchors itself. It is the temple where the soul learns to remain with what is, where you stop seeking transcendence as an escape and begin to live presence as a practice. This changes everything, because now you understand that you no longer need to wait to feel good to believe you are evolving. You can feel messed up and still be deeply connected. The hidden key, the one almost no one gives you, is this: when the human within you reacts, hurts, explodes, feels, it's because the divine within you is finally present enough to no longer run from it. And that, as disconcerting as it may seem, is a gift. So the next time you emerge from an intense spiritual experience and feel chaos approaching, breathe. Remember this: the soul is simply showing you where love is still lacking. And where love is lacking, the divine acts. Not to save you, but to invite you to participate in your own healing, to make you a co-creator of your own transformation. This is the path of consciousness, the path that no longer seeks transcendent experiences merely to escape pain, but that accepts pain as part of the journey, that honors crying as prayer, that respects anger as energy in motion, that understands that sometimes emptiness is the fertile ground for rebirth. If this example spoke to any part of you, if you've ever felt lost after a spiritual experience that should have uplifted you, if you've ever cried when you thought you were getting better, felt more wounded the more you tried to heal, write in the comments, "My shadow is being touched by the light," because only those who have the courage to look at their own shadow with presence are capable of experiencing the sacred with truth, and the path is still alive, waiting to be traversed wholeheartedly. There's a point in the journey where something quietly shifts. It's not a snap, it's not a mystical vision, it's not a loud epiphany. It's more subtle, it's almost imperceptible. But you know something has shifted within you, because for the first time in a long time, you no longer want to run away. For the first time, discomfort doesn't terrify you as much as it used to. The pain, though still present, is no longer a sentence. It's a territory you begin to explore with softer eyes, with a more awakened soul. The shame that once made you hide parts of yourself now begins to seem unnecessary. You begin to allow yourself to be, even if you don't yet know exactly who you're becoming. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." And this legend doesn't begin when everything goes right. It begins when you understand that everything that has gone wrong up until now was also part of your soul's sacred plot. It begins when you stop trying to appear spiritual and start living authentically. And authenticity is often messy, imperfect, vulnerable, but that's precisely where the truth lies. You don't need to be enlightened to accept yourself. You need to accept yourself to finally begin to illuminate what has been denied for so long. You are divine and human, and true freedom lies not in denying either side. It lies in accepting both, in honoring both, in understanding that the spirituality that excludes the human is merely a disguise for the ego, a spiritualized ego that dresses in light but is still terrified of the shadow. What truly liberates is integration. It's when you understand that there is no part of you that needs to be extinguished for the divine to flourish. Everything within you can be touched by presence. Everything can be included. Nothing needs to be rejected. And when this awareness begins to take hold, something magical happens. You stop constantly seeking signs from the universe. You stop searching everywhere for answers. You stop relying on external spiritual validation, because you begin to realize that the greatest revelation is already happening within you, that the process is alive, that there is no single right path, no single way to feel, no single way to awaken. You are your own temple. Your body is the altar. Your pain is the lesson, and your soul is the teacher. This shift in consciousness isn't a final place. It's an inner space that opens up, where you begin to realize you no longer need to run from yourself, that what you felt was weakness was just sensitivity, that what you called a relapse was just a return to what still needs to be embraced, that the oscillation between light and shadow isn't a flaw, it's flow, it's human, it's divine, it's natural. and you begin to relate to your feelings differently. Pain comes, and you listen. Fear appears, and you breathe. Sadness approaches, and you stop running, because now you have presence, and presence is the greatest miracle. Not the miracle that takes you away from reality, but the one that allows you to inhabit it fully. It's this wholeness that the soul seeks. Not a perfect, clean, always balanced state, but a true state. A place where you can cry and still be awake. Where you can feel anger and still be at peace with who you are. Where you can contradict yourself and forgive yourself. Where you understand that the soul's journey is not measured by how much light you feel, but by how capable you become of loving your own shadows. This shift in consciousness also brings a consequence. You begin to move away from what is false, without needing to judge, without needing to attack. It simply no longer fits. People, environments, content that once made sense no longer vibrate at the same rate as you. Not because you're better, but because you're now more in tune with what's essential. And what's essential, almost always, is silent. It's profound. It's subtle. It's true. You begin to choose more carefully where you put your energy. You begin to say no more firmly. You begin to prioritize yourself without guilt, because now you understand that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's spirituality incarnate. It's an act of love, a commitment to the divine that dwells within you. And this commitment requires courage. The courage to let go of everything that is no longer you. The courage to unlearn in order to relearn. The courage to continue even when your mind still doubts. It's at this moment that the path ceases to be a search and becomes an encounter with what was already within, with what has always been there, and you no longer need to try so hard, because the soul begins to take the helm, and it steers with lightness. Not the lightness of absence of pain, but the lightness of presence. Because when you are whole, even what weighs you down becomes possible to carry. This awareness changes the way you see yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you listen to yourself. Your inner dialogue stops being cruel. It starts being more compassionate. You stop comparing yourself. You stop punishing yourself for not being evolved enough. You stop demanding perfection that was never your soul's plan. And you start treating yourself with more kindness. You begin to understand that each phase has its value, that each discomfort has its place, that each silence also speaks. And perhaps at this point in your journey, you'll start to remember all the times you felt like you couldn't handle it, and realize you endured, you passed, you made it through, and more than that, you grew. Even when everything seemed dark, something inside you remained lit. A spark, a hope, a love you might not even know how to name, but it was there, sustaining everything. This love is the divine you accessed, and it never went away. It was just waiting for you to stop hiding from yourself. If all this that you are feeling seems confusing, but at the same time true, if you realize that something is silently changing inside you, write here in the comments, "I choose to live my own legend," because this choice spoken out loud, felt in your heart, is the first step toward transforming everything, and the path is still alive, vibrating to the rhythm of your soul. Spirituality is not an escape route. Despite what many try to sell, it doesn't take you away from pain, nor does it elevate you above human emotions. It's not a ladder to escape the world. It's a mirror placed right in the center of your soul. And this mirror doesn't just reflect what's beautiful, evolved, elevated. It shows you everything, including what you'd rather not see, including what you've struggled to forget. Because true spiritual awakening doesn't happen outside of you. It happens within. And within, God doesn't come disguised as celestial light. He comes dressed in everything that still pulses in silence. Fear, anger, sadness, emptiness, shame, but also love. A love so deep, so present, so unconditional, that it embraces all these parts as if they were sacred. That's what spirituality does when it's real. It strips you bare. It strips away all the layers you've created to survive. It tears apart every concept you use to protect yourself. It disorganizes everything you've been accustomed to. And after all this, it sits you down, before yourself, and invites you to stay. Not so you can solve everything, but so you can learn to feel without running away. So you can stop trying to understand and start listening. This listening is silent. It has no clear language. It's the body that feels. It's the soul that recognizes. It's the heart that begins to open. Because there, where you thought there was only pain, now something new begins to emerge. It's not constant peace. It's not certainty. It's presence. And presence changes everything. Because when you are present, you no longer need to run from what you feel. You begin to integrate, to embrace the rejected parts, to make space for what once paralyzed you. You begin to realize that fear, which has always been your enemy, actually just wants to be heard, that the longing that gripped your chest was actually your soul calling you back. That sadness wasn't the end of everything but the beginning of healing. And that love, the love you sought so much in others, was there, inside, silent, waiting for the moment you stopped searching for it outside. And when that moment arrives, everything changes. Not on the outside, but on the inside. Life remains the same. The pain continues to exist. The challenges still arise. But now you are no longer the same. Because now you no longer abandon yourself. Now you begin to support your own process, with firmness, with respect, with awareness. This is true integration. It's not when you overcome your shadows. It's when you learn to walk with them. When you stop fighting who you are and start walking with truth. When you understand that spirituality isn't performance, it's presence. It's not a concept, it's experience. It's not theory, it's practice. And the practice is simple, yet profound. Being with what is. And what it is, isn't always pretty. It's not always light. It's not always easy. But it's true. And this truth heals. It heals because it no longer requires you to pretend. It heals because it allows you to be whole. It heals because it teaches you that there is no spirituality separate from pain. There is spirituality, that pain. There is spirituality with the pain. There is spirituality that goes through the pain and transforms. This is what begins to blossom within you. The awareness that you no longer need to deny any part of yourself. That all versions of you deserve to exist. That every phase of your process has something to teach. That all cycles, even the darkest ones, are part of the soul's plan. There is no mistake. There is no delay. There is no deviation. There is a path. There always has been. And this path begins within. Within every silence, every tear, every feeling you've tried to stifle. That's where the divine resides. Not high in the mountains, not in the distant temple, not in the pretty speech, but there at the very point where you thought you were broken. Because it wasn't a break. It was an opening. It was a passage. It was a space for the light to enter with more truth. The spirituality that transforms is the one that promises you nothing but itself. It doesn't promise immediate relief, but it does promise truth. It offers no guarantees, but it does offer depth. And depth, contrary to what it may seem, is not a dark place. It's a place where everything takes on meaning, where even pain finds meaning, where even absence becomes presence, where even confusion becomes initiation. You begin to understand that you no longer need to be perfect to be spiritual, that you don't need to have all the answers to continue, that you don't need to feel good all the time to be on the path. You just need to be willing not to give up, because the soul doesn't want to rush. It wants wholeness, and this wholeness doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. It comes from listening. It comes from surrender. And surrendering isn't giving up. It's trusting. Trusting that even when everything seems silent, something is moving. Trusting that even when you feel nothing, the process continues. Trusting that even when everything inside you still seems confused, there's a greater wisdom guiding everything. Because there always has been. And this wisdom doesn't speak loudly. It whispers, it touches, it waits. And when you become silent enough to listen, something changes. Your gaze changes. Your breathing changes. Your self-treatment changes. You begin to speak more tenderly to yourself. You begin to respect your limits. You begin to stop comparing yourself. You begin to value the simple things. You begin to live with greater presence. And this presence is the miracle. It's this presence that heals. Not the one that pretends, but the one that feels. The one that welcomes. The one that remains. The one that learns to experience spirituality as an internal state, not as an external appearance. It's this presence that sustains you when the world demands haste. It's the one that anchors you when everything outside seems too noisy. It's the one that reminds you every day that you no longer need to run, that now you can stay. And staying with truth is what transforms everything. If you feel that this presence is beginning to be born within you, even if shyly, even if silently, write here in the comments, "I found God within my pain." Because only those who have the courage to look within with the eyes of their soul are capable of transforming scars into wisdom. And the path continues, with more truth at every step. The pain of being human is sacred, not just bearable, not just an inevitable burden of existence, but sacred. And this is a truth that only reveals itself when you stop fighting it, when you stop seeing it as an obstacle and start seeing it as a bridge between who you believed you needed to be and who you truly are, a bridge between the rigidity of control and the softness of surrender, a bridge between the divine you have touched and the flesh it longs to inhabit. You didn't come here to escape the pain. You came to go through it, with awareness, with courage, with truth, because it's in it that you'll find what was never destroyed. Pain isn't what breaks you. It's what reveals the part that never broke, the part that remained intact while everything fell apart, the part that watched it all happen and remained there, silent, alive, waiting for the moment when you would come back to yourself. And that moment has arrived. You've touched the divine. You've felt its presence. You've realized there's something greater than your pain, greater than your fears, greater than the traumas you believed were eternal. But now the true invitation presents itself, to embrace what's still wounded within you, because it's not enough to touch the divine. You must let it touch what you still try to hide. Have you ever felt this duality? The contrast between moments of profound expansion and the everyday reality that seems to pull you back. The confusion of waking up after a spiritual experience and feeling more lost than before. The frustration of realizing you still react, still feel anger, still carry sadness. And then you ask yourself, how can I have touched the sacred and yet be so hurt? But what if I told you that it's precisely because you've touched the sacred that the pain now seems clearer? What if I told you that the light you've accessed is illuminating parts that were previously dormant? What if I told you that there's nothing wrong with what you're feeling now? On the contrary, it's a sign that you're ready to integrate. The pain that returns after the light is not a punishment. It's an invitation to descend with presence. To descend not as one who loses oneself, but as one who finds oneself again. To descend to the core of who you are, and there, in that forgotten place, allow the divine to manifest itself in flesh. And flesh, here, is not weakness. It is power. It is a living soul inhabiting a body with limits, with emotions, with stories, with scars. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But perhaps now you need to hear something even more profound. The wound is the place where the light enters you, until of you. Because after you allowed the divine to enter, now it wants to manifest itself. And to do so, it will pass through your cracks, through your most fragile parts, through your oldest memories, through your rawest emotions. It will come out where you cried, where you trembled, where you gave up, because that's exactly where the truth resides. This truth is raw, yes, but it's alive. And real life isn't measured by how many times you manage to appear strong. It's measured by how many times you decide to keep going, even when everything inside you is messed up. Real life isn't about spiritual perfection. It's about emotional authenticity. It's about having the courage to look at yourself with softer eyes, to say, I still don't know how to heal this, but I'm not going to run away anymore. It's about stopping demanding that everything be solved, and finally allowing healing to happen. You no longer need to prove you're okay. You no longer need to wear the armor of strength. You no longer need to hide your sensitivity, because now you know it's not weakness. It's a portal that opens every time you cry truthfully, every time you breathe amidst the chaos, every time you decide to stay with yourself, even when everything inside you screams for escape. This is the true miracle. Not the miracle that changes everything on the outside, but the one that transforms everything on the inside. The miracle of accepting pain without giving up, of continuing even without understanding, of loving yourself even on days when nothing makes sense. The miracle of being human with a soul. And being human with a soul is a daily choice, a silent choice, a choice that isn't always understood, because the world still values performance, speed, control, but the soul doesn't operate at that pace. It flourishes in the time of silence, in the time of listening, in the time of breathing. And you've already started listening. You heard something different within yourself. You heard the voice that doesn't come from the mind, the voice that whispers yet is the most real, the voice that says, it's okay to feel, it's okay to not know, it's okay to just be. This is the voice of the soul, the voice of the divine, the voice that sustains you even when everything else seems to be falling apart. And that voice will not abandon you, because now you know where to find it, not in magic formulas, not in distant gurus, but in your own heart, in your silence, in your pain. Because now you understand, the divine is not far away. It is here. It is in every conscious breath, in every tear allowed, in every truth assumed. It is within you. So, may you continue with presence, continue with kindness, continue even on difficult days, because every step, no matter how small, is building the most important return of your life, the return home. And home, here, is the place where you no longer need to pretend. It's where you find yourself, with what you've always been, with what has always been inside you, waiting to be recognized. If this journey you are experiencing resembles all of this, if you feel like you are touching the divine but also facing what still hurts, write in the comments, "My pain is also sacred," because when you acknowledge this out loud, something begins to reorganize within you. And this reorganization is the beginning of a new cycle that is about to unfold. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because something inside you recognized this truth. You felt it. You saw it. You didn't just hear the words, you lived each one within your soul. And because of that, this space is yours too. Now I invite you to continue this journey with me, because what you're feeling is just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey of the soul together. Each video here is a door, each word a key, and you've already begun to open it. And if this video touched you deeply, please leave a like. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a sign that your soul has been seen, heard, and welcomed here. Now take a deep breath and move on to the next video that's appearing on the screen. It's the natural continuation of what you've experienced here. The journey doesn't end, it only deepens, and I'll be there waiting for you.